What really defines adventure? Is it traveling to an exciting faraway place? Or how about conquering a heavy challenge or obstacle? Maybe it's even a relationship that's deepened over years of memories. Whatever it is though, I think it's safe to say that adventure means something different to each and every person. And Dragon Quest is a series that really understands that. Adventure is the very heartbeat of these games, but there's one title in particular that, at least in my eyes, perfectly epitomizes what an adventure can and should be. Hi there, my name is Daniel, and I think Dragon Quest III is pretty creative. So, I was in the middle of writing the script when this happened. Now, if you've played Octopath Traveler, then you're familiar with this HD 2D approach. This style is absolutely gorgeous, and after Square released its modern retro fusion a couple years back, RPG fans everywhere started clamoring for their favorite classics to get the same treatment. And what do you know? Square heard, at least some of you. Sorry, Final Fantasy VI. But I'll be the first to say, you should be excited about this. If you've never played Dragon Quest III, you owe it to yourself to drop a few dollars on it while we wait for this remake. That's right, I just asked you to buy this game twice. That's what I'm doing, and the one I played first is the Switch's modified port of the mobile version. I talked a bit in my last couple videos about the quality of these ports, especially in the graphical department. But if you ask me, the style looks kind of alright this time around. The sprite work still looks a bit too polished compared to the pixel art environments, but it's been cleaned up a bit and doesn't clash nearly as bad as the previous two titles. So between the NES original, Super Famicom version, Game Boy Color release, the updated port, and the upcoming remake, fans have had plenty of opportunities to step into this hero's legendary shoes over the years. It's one of the most widely available and widely celebrated games in the series, so much so that it's often considered the culmination of Dragon Quest's core identity, if not the RPG genre as a whole. But why is this game so revered? What is it about this third entry that keeps it relevant today? I think the answer is a lot of things, but if I had to sum it up, I'd say that Dragon Quest III provides a robust yet concise adventure that gives each individual player a real sense of personal ownership. It's what all great RPGs should strive to be, in my opinion. And while it's certainly not perfect, I find it difficult to complain about really anything in this game. For starters, the bread and butter role-playing gameplay from the first game has been refined into a beautiful dance between combat and exploration. The second game made some great steps in expanding the formula on both of those fronts, but many of the flaws and imbalances of its approach have been ironed out in this entry. You now travel the world as a party of 4 instead of 3, and the difficulty curve of the enemy hordes you fight is much more bearable this time around. But Dragon Quest hasn't been the only cool 80s kid on the block. Final Fantasy had been released only a few months prior, and it was already taking the world by storm with its fresh take on classic D&D style gameplay. Square's Instant Classic had brought defined character classes to Yuji Horíi's RPG formula, and players could build their unique experience from the very get-go by choosing classes for their party members. But as an immediate answer, here comes Dragon Quest III. See, the thing with Final Fantasy is that you were locked into your chosen character classes for the entire playthrough. But in Dragon Quest III, you're able to freely experiment with the game's 8 classes throughout your entire adventure. In fact, I was actually shocked when I stumbled upon Patty's Party Planning Palace. Say that 10 times fast. I'm more used to recruiting pre-built party members throughout the course of an adventure with a set growth arc and established backstories. But here, you don't have to worry about any of that crap. Patty, this girl right here, she's Patty, lets you recruit a variety of party planning members from the get-go. And I use that term very loosely, because let's be honest, you're literally just creating characters here. You choose their name, gender, class, and since the Super Famicom release, their base stats as well, which then determine their personality and stat growth. But it doesn't even stop there, because even after you've recruited at least one party member from each class, you're then free to switch them in and out of your playable party at any point throughout your adventure. Of course, you'll have to travel back to Patty's every time you want to do so, and the extra grinding it takes to keep those additional party members adequately leveled up is a little tedious. The classes themselves are a blast to play around with though. Your warrior, priest, and mage are pretty standard and reliable, but don't sleep on the martial artists, which can absolutely tear through enemies with the proper training. Then you've got the merchants and thieves, which grant the party some super useful skills outside of battle. And heck, even the useless gadabout class comes in handy later on. These guys are straight up liabilities on the battlefield, but they're the only ones who get free access to the Sage class once they reach level 20. And if all of that isn't enough, you can also reclass any of these friends at All Trades Abbey later in the game, which effectively stacks their previous class perks with their new ones. Are we seeing the possibilities yet? One of the coolest parts of playing through these early JRPGs has been seeing the development of choice and strategy within each game's design. Dragon Quest started us off simple with a single character and not a whole lot of combat options. Then the second game gave us the party, and asked players to synergize their 3 playable characters to succeed. But it's in this title that we see the first true expression of party building in the Dragon Quest series. Final Fantasy might have created memorable experiences through forcing players to commit to their party, but Dragon Quest III lets players own their adventure by asking them to experiment. Because at the end of the day, Dragon Quest III really is your adventure. More so than any of the titles that came before it, this one puts you in the driver's seat and asks, what kind of experience do you want? And that's mainly a gameplay thing, yes. But there's also an important narrative element to this as well. If the game's hero is really meant to be an avatar for the player, there needs to be a real connection there. Their motivation needs to become your motivation. Their quest needs to become your quest. And right off the bat, Dragon Quest III is coming in hot with this. The first thing you do, unless you're playing the NES version, is essentially answer a personality quiz in this dream sequence. This is actually how your character's personality is chosen. And although you can change it later on with various items throughout the world if you want specific stat growth, there's something special about these choices at the beginning that put me in the hero's shoes when I play. But aside from your personality, who are you? I mean, in the game. What space do you occupy in this crazy, fantastical world? Well, you're the child of a guy named Ortega, a legendary hero who set off to defeat the evil Archfiend, which threatens to plunge the world into darkness. But he doesn't return. So, naturally, once you come of age, you decide to leave your home to search for your father and finish what he started. All in all, not bad for an early RPG. I mean, the setup here isn't earth-shattering, but there's an elegance in its simplicity that allows you to quickly connect with your avatar's quest without getting into the weeds like many RPGs would do later on. And it's not just saving the world from a generic evil threat, although there's definitely some of that. There's a sense of mystery and intrigue. I wanted to know what happened to my father, because y'all, this guy is an absolute legend. Literally everywhere you go, people are like, dude, Ortega is the freaking man. He's traveled all around the world, and getting to adventure in his wake like this makes him feel all the more legendary. But at the end of the day, this is your legend in the making, and the game does some cool things to guide you as you take ownership of it. So we talked in the Dragon Quest II episode about how that game introduced this 2-part progression structure to ease players into the experience before removing the training wheels. But here, that 2-part structure has actually become 3 parts. Well, technically 4, but I won't spoil the end. Anyway, part 1 is your tutorial. You're stuck on this relatively small continent until you can fight your way to this teleportal. Yes, that's what it's called, which gives you access to the rest of the world. And in the process of doing so, you'll travel through a couple towns, conquer a dungeon, buy some equipment, and level up a fair amount. It's essentially a microcosm of what you'll experience in the rest of the game. Where you at, Great Plateau? This game's got 3 decades on you. And once you get off that island, part 2 starts ramping up the challenge considerably. The dungeons get longer and the towns are less frequent. This is where you'll want to start that party experimentation we were talking about. But at this point in your journey, you're still landlocked. There's a few branching paths here and there, but it becomes clear very quickly where you can and can't travel at your current level. This section is largely focused on testing your skills without requiring a lot of exploration. No, the exploration really opens up in part 3 when you're given the boat. Similar to the previous game, you're asked to collect a handful of relics to reach the endgame, and it's at this point that the training wheels are removed entirely. And yes, like in the previous game, this section can also feel a little tedious after the 8th time you've wandered into a territory you're underleveled for. But the absurd balance issues have largely been addressed here, which allows the exploration to feel more exciting and less frustrating. Because this world really is a blast to experience. It's so vast with a bunch of unique, creative locales and... Wait a second. Okay, so yes, the world of Dragon Quest III is pretty heavily based on our own, but I don't think that makes the game less creative at all. Maybe if the design was overused, but this is the only time this world map appears in the series to this point. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a game pull so heavily from real-world geography, and honestly, I think it's pretty genius. As soon as I caught on to this, I immediately felt even more connected to this quest and this world. It gave me a sense of warm familiarity walking into towns like Romaria, based on Rome, and Isis, based on Egypt. I started to form expectations for what I would see upon exploring various parts of the world, but I was still excited and even surprised by what greeted me much of the time. It gave me the feeling that I was traveling the real world on my own adventure, getting to experience all these unique places and cultures. By using our Earth as a basis for Dragon Quest III's world, Chunsoft gave themselves an easy segue to express culture in a way they never had before. Sure, there were lots of towns to explore in prior games, but with such limited hardware at the time, there was only so much developers could do to set each settlement apart from the others. But here, it's obvious which civilizations are based on Japan, America, and even Scandinavia, partially because of their locations, but also due to the expertly crafted aesthetics and witty dialogue. Later entries in this series would continue to iterate on this sense of culture, but for me, Dragon Quest III's approach is the most iconic. So getting back to that question that's been gnawing at me, what really defines adventure? And what separates the games that get it right from those that drop the ball? Honestly, I think that more than any particular setting, genre, or narrative structure, an adventure has to be a journey of personal growth. For you, maybe it's honing a skill through hours of practice, or maybe it's just learning a valuable life lesson after a challenging experience. Either way, it's not an adventure if you don't show up, and it's not an adventure if you don't take something away. That's what I love about Dragon Quest III. This game, in such a simple, elegant fashion, asked me to show up and invest in my adventure. It required me to spend time and resources building up my team and honing my strategies. It allowed me to experience a grand world full of charming characters as I looked for the one that was most important. But most of all, it led me to reflect on how I'd grown over the course of my experience. Dragon Quest III became my journey, and it reminded me of why I fell in love with video games in the first place. I love having fun and unplugging as much as the next guy. But at the end of the day, I want my life to have purpose, and I'm grateful that it does. I want to grow from the adventures I have, and I want to learn from the art I'm experiencing. But what about you? What makes video games special to you? And what's an adventure that you've taken a lot from? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Next time, we're handing things back to Squaresoft with Final Fantasy II, so ring that notification bell so you'll know when it's live. Alright, obligatory YouTube stuff over. Thanks for watching, y'all. See you friends next time.